Welcome to another Charles Kwame podcast. We have Michael Shermer with us today. He's the founding publisher at Skeptic Magazine. He's the president fellow at Chapman University, host of the Michael Shermer Show podcast. He's a former evangelical turned professional skeptic. He spent decades dissecting belief systems, conspiracy theories, and pseudoscience. So, author of bestsellers including Why People Believe Weird Things, A Moral Arc, Giving the Devil His Due. His work sits at the intersection of science, psychology, philosophy, with a relentless drive to promote critical thinking and rational inquiry. So, Michael, I'm glad to have you on the pod here. Tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Oh, nice to see you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, well, I'm here in the offices of the Skeptic Society and Skeptic Magazine. Here's what it looks like. Here's a recent issue on crime and punishment. So it's a science magazine that tries to deal with any kind of controversial, marginal, borderlands, fringe areas related to science. Like we did one on trans matters. We did one on abortion. We've done quite a few on artificial intelligence. We deal with, of course, religion and all that. So my thing is trying to know what we should believe. That is, what's true, what's justified true belief as knowledge is defined, and so what constitutes justified, what kind of evidence is there, and so on. Who should I believe? Should I always believe the experts and the mainstream media and government agencies and so on, or should I be skeptical? And the answer to this question is it depends. It depends on what the claim is, depends on how extraordinary the claim is, for how much evidence you need for it, and so on. And in some issues, it's quite clear. You know, the theory of evolution is very sound. The Big Bang theory, the origins of the universe, is very sound. But you know what's actually going on in Iran with their nuclear facilities? Okay, I'm gonna listen to the mainstream government agencies and media, but maybe I'll be slightly skeptical just in case, because complex political economic issues are not like physics and biology. They're contaminated with human agency and so on. So in every case, we every issue of Skeptic it deals with a particular theme to it, and we try to pick things that people are interested in, that are important, and that science and reason can have something to say.
Right. Let's talk about some latest issues, and I guess we'll get a glimpse about how you think that will give an audience a clear view of your brain. Crime and punishment, for example. So, yeah, I was watching episodes of Cops as of late. I was like, yeah, some cops do their jobs, but a lot of people get very harsh punishments, right? Just for having weed on them, for example, or hunting knife, and it's quite ridiculous the treatment and the impact, the outmeasured impact it can have on their life and everything else, right? So, what was the addition about crime and punishment, for example? Do you think that the current justice system is fair in every regards? Let's start with that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a complicated issue, and of course, it depends on which area we're talking about. Most cops are good and just trying to do the right thing and do their job, but there are bad cops, right? There are racist cops and cops that exceed the training limits of violence against citizens, and so in the same way that we have bad accountants who engage in embezzlement of their customers' corporations and so on, we should get rid of the bad accountants. We should get rid of the bad cops, but not defund all accountants or not defund the police, right? So right there is a lesson in extremism. Don't go too far. Everything should be treated as gradual, slow, incremental improvements in all areas of life, and so that would be one of them. Now, one of the issues in crime and punishment is retributive justice versus restorative justice. Most Western criminal justice systems have been retributive historically. That is, we're going to punish the criminal. We're going to punish the wrongdoer. It's very Old Testament. It's very biblically based, which is what our jurisprudence was originally grounded in, is biblical principles, particularly Old Testament, where you punish the person for the wrongdoing. Starting in the Enlightenment, so 18th century, there was a shift toward a more utilitarian game theory type analysis where you want to make the punishments fit the crime with an aim to deterrence. That is, what's the best thing for society. Forget what the criminal deserves in some cosmic justice sense. We don't live in the next life in which there's a cosmic courthouse and that'll all be dealt with. We live in the here and now. We want society to improve, so we should make the punishments fit the crime. So the worse the crime, the stronger the punishments, and so on. This was by a utilitarian philosopher, Cesare Beccaria, who wrote a popular book on crime and punishment, it was called. And he was the first to lay out the idea that you should have a proportionality in your criminal justice. That is, proportional to the crime should be the punishment. And ever since then, that's kind of how Western jurisprudence is based. We do have a lot of errors in the system, so it's also a signal detection problem. Signal detection is another one of these tools of science and reason that we employ to figure out what we should believe, what's the right thing to believe. So in the case of criminal justice, you have somebody in court who's been accused of the crime, and then you decide yes, they're guilty, or no, they're innocent, or they're not guilty. And so if the person really did do it and you convict them, that's a hit in game theory parlance. And if the person really didn't do it, they're really innocent, and you acquit them, that's a correct rejection, as it's called in signal detection. Those are the two boxes we want to get right. But there's two other errors that could be made, type 1 and type 2 errors. That is a false positive, where you think the person did it, but they didn't do it. And then you have the false negative, the type 2 error, where they did do it, but you acquit them, and then they're set free. Now, the problem in criminal justice is we almost never actually know what happened. So to determine the truth, you have a jury system with an adversarial lawyer system where each side has somebody that makes their case. And the goal of this is not to get to the truth of what actually happened. The goal is for the jury to decide whether the person should be set free or not, regardless of what happened, who had the better arguments. Now, juries would like to know what really happened. Did OJ really kill his wife or whatever? But that's not how the criminal justice system is set up. So it's a little different than, say, the way science works or journalism works. In that it's an adversarial system. So, the point of your lawyer is not to figure out what you really did. The point of your lawyer is to get you free, for you to win. And in fact, that's, if they don't do that, you could legitimately fire them. Your job was to get me acquitted. It doesn't matter what happened, right? So, but the problem with the signal detection thing is that there's a lot of innocent people who are wrongly convicted, and so there's a famous the Blackstone ratio of 10-1. That is, better 10 guilty people go free than that one innocent person be convicted. And that's the sense that most jurors have. We'd rather let this guy go, even though he might be guilty, because if he's innocent and we convict him, that's even worse. Right. So now in U.S. jurisprudence, there's two different kinds of trials. There's criminal. There's the state trials, criminal trials, and then there's civil. The civil trials are where the government doesn't have anything to do with the case, other than hosting the jury and the courtroom. But in the case of criminal trials, like, say, the families of the victim, they don't have any say in the matter, really. It's just up to the state. So, for example, in California, the filmmaker Roman Polanski, was found guilty in 1979 of raping a 13-year-old, and so he left. He went to Europe, and he's never coming back. And he's a free man there. But if he ever came back to California, he'd be put in prison. And even though the woman, who is now like in her 60s, says, "I don't care, I forgave him, and I just let him go free," the state of California says, "Oh no, he violated the laws of California. Regardless of what you think, this is what the state thinks." So, there's a lot in there that allows for, I don't know, inefficiencies, unfairness, and the way I described it the more money you have, the better attorneys you can hire, and they are truly much better at getting you free, regardless of what actually happened. Again, that's not the goal. And so, poor people, particularly people of color, really do have an unfair advantage in the criminal justice system here. Anyway, so in that particular issue, we explore all those different subjects.
Right. And what would be a better system than the current one we have, one that is more utilitarian based and more beneficial for the broader good of the population? In my opinion, as a technologist, would probably be AI based, less human bias, just the facts, and calculate every single pieces of data and run possibilities of what would happen if we jail that guy, if we put him in a transition house, or if we don't do anything. What do you think about that?
Well, many European countries already do what you suggest, although I'm not sure about how much they use AI, but they should. I think it's a useful tool to have. I don't know if I want to ask Grok if OJ really did it or not, but the idea that that a jury of your peers. Oh boy, I've not served on a jury, but I've been in many courtrooms where I get called for jury duty, and I sit there. I haven't been called yet, but boy, this is a frightening prospect. I mean, most people do not know how to think critically about evidence. They're just clueless, and they're totally contaminated by cognitive biases and their emotions. And so, probably even a crude AI would be better than human jurors. What I would like to see would be human jurors trained, like professional jurors who are paid, a really good salary, and this is all they do is they hear legal cases, and they serve on juries professionally, and they've been trained. They've taken courses on how to evaluate evidence, on rationality and logic and science and reason, and how the criminal justice system works, the tricks of attorneys that they'll try to pull on you, and what to look for. There, I would be far more trusting of criminal justice system. And to that extent, I think professional jurors could benefit from AI. I don't think AI is ready to replace jurors completely, but as a tool. And I would say that generally about AI. I'm not an AI doomsayer. I'm not one of these people that thinks this is the end of the world. I've read all the AI doomsayer books and so on, but I'm not convinced. I think it's a useful tool that could cause problems, but problems always exist with new technologies. Then you just move forward and fix the problems. The example I give is I drive a Tesla, and I've been told for years, I've had a Tesla since 2015. It's my third Tesla now, 10 years of Teslas. I've been hearing since I bought my first one that because the car is online, that a criminal could take over my steering wheel and drive it into a wall. And for that matter, a terrorist organization could take control of like every Tesla in California, and you're driving down the 405 freeway, and they turn all of the thousands of Teslas into the wall and cause a mass casualty event. Yeah, okay. How come this hasn't happened? Because they've also been saying for the same amount of time that airplanes are online, and that they could cause airplanes to fall out of the sky. Yeah, okay. How come it hasn't happened? Because there are terrorists, there are people that would like to do something like that, but they can't. So I just think the kinds of AI threats that people write about are exaggerated, not thought through. They don't realize, how difficult it could be to do something like that, and they underestimate the role of the regulatory state. Again, people love to hate Elon Musk now, but in fact, if one of his cars, or a bunch of his cars, all of a sudden started, mowing down pedestrians on sidewalks because there was a traffic jam. Well, how long would it be before the federal government regulators, swooped in on Tesla headquarters and said, "All right, we're putting an end to this right now. You either fix this problem immediately, or we're shutting your company down." They would do that.
Yep.
And so I my thing on AI in any area of life is just go for it, and then if problems arise, we'll deal with it then.
Right. Okay. AI, yeah, it's going to cause problems for sure. It's going to slash a bunch of jobs. I have deep evidence regarding this, and not all humans are problem solvers. A lot of humans like to be taken care of. Admittedly, a majority would just love to be fed serotonin on a daily basis, VR and porn and ice cream. Vs a couple of go-getters would want to stay in the game, stay in the pain game, right? Instead of just constantly going for short-term gratification. Do you think that's going to happen as a
No,
skeptic?
I do not think that will happen. Maybe there'll be a few people that want to just sit there in their on their couch in it with a a VI headset and a serotonin or a dopamine pump. But I doubt it. Most people are find that boring. I mean, almost anything you can think of that's fun to do, it's fun to do for a limited period of time. After a while, it's not fun anymore. It just gets boring. And
I disagree. Video games. I
video
used to
games,
play World of Warcraft 12 hours a day. I'm actually watching World of Warcraft on this screen right now to
okay.
trick my brain into gamification.
That's really funny. Maybe it's because I'm an older generation, baby boomers. I didn't grow up with. I have to say, I have a 9-year-old, and he is totally into Minecraft. I mean,
Yeah.
he could play that all day and night if I didn't put a stop to it. So maybe you're right, but not everybody, right? I mean, some people want to, go do something different. They want to get outdoors. They want to, start up a company and make a lot of. How are you going to make a lot of money? There's people that are ambitious. They want to live prosperous lives. How are they going to do that? Strapped into an AI driven
But
VI.
that's the 1% of us, right? Like,
1%. Yeah. Well, this is one answer, by the way, to the Fermi paradox of where is everybody? Where are all the aliens? Because we can't be first. One answer is that they're just on their home planet strapped into a VR. They're in the holodeck living their best life there, maybe.
or
Um,
nanobots.
or nanobots. Yeah. Yeah. They are here. They're just tiny and can't be seen anyway. I don't know. Charles, it's possible there'll be some percentage of people who are harmed by this. But this is already happening, and we're dealing with it now. That is to say, the effects of social media on teen anxiety, depression, cutting, suicidal ideation, and so on. There's now a huge movement. Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, has been on the New York Times bestseller list for over a year straight, every week. There's another new book out coming out by my friend Gene Twangy, social psychologist, on like 10. What is it? 10 steps to protect your children from social media. And she just had basic rules, no smartphones until you get a driver's license, or no social media until you get a driver's license. Your first phone, the kid's first phone, should be just a flip phone. No, it's not online. And phone free schools, no phones in schools. A lot of schools are already doing this. I think this is good. So I would rather go forward with new and better technology to solve the problem. Let's say that smartphones, and social media are causing children now, rather than say the government swoops in and bans all smartphones or bans social media or tries to regulate Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and so on. I just don't like the idea of government over heavy regulation, because that also causes problems, not to mention restricts freedom.
Yeah, and when you mess with libertarians, you usually get a bunch of backlash. So yesterday I had, let's see here, Dr. Peter McCulloch on the podcast, right? Like, and he's been labeled as conspiracy theorist a couple of times with COVID. In your opinion, what happened with COVID, and what are your thoughts on McCulloch?
Oh, I don't know him. I know a lot of the libertarian people, but okay, my thoughts on COVID. Well, I think, well, first of all, it's real, and it really did kill a lot of people, more than the flu, but not nearly as disastrous as what the doomsayers thought it would be. Just in general, I would say doomsayers are almost always wrong, and they almost always exaggerate how bad things are going to get. But in general, I think we knew. Okay, let's backtrack here. So it enters the United States in January of 2020. In March, April, we start closing all the schools. By the end of April, schools are closed, restaurants are closed, and so on. Society is shutting down, social distancing, masks, and so on. It seems clear by now that by the summer, say end of summer, July, August of 2020, we knew that the virus primarily affected older people and people with comorbidities, as they're called. They're overweight, obesity, diabetes, various cardiovascular and lung diseases and issues that they're dealing with. That's who was really dying mostly from COVID. It was clear that the least affected were children, kids, minors of all kinds. And so it was clear by, let's say, mid-July that it was okay to open the schools in September of 2020. And even the major teachers unions said, yeah, we should open the schools in fall. But then Trump endorsed the idea of opening the schools. In fact, posted on X, or maybe it was on X, I think, that we're going to open the schools in the fall. And so I hate to say this because it sounds so trite, but a lot of people do have Trump derangement syndrome. Whatever Trump says, we're going to do the opposite. Doesn't matter what it is. And I think that's what happened. And there's a lot of documentation showing this, that everybody knew, including the medical authorities, that children were okay, that it was actually okay not just to open the schools, but also open restaurants and public venues, ballparks, get the sports back up and running. Let's get back to life. The other thing I mentioned, signal detection theory, with my little 2x2 grid there. The economists have a concept called opportunity costs. So if you spend money in one area, what are you not spending money on? Or you spend time doing one thing, what are you not spending time doing that you're missing out on? Most people forget that. So by closing the schools, shutting down the economy, yes, okay, so maybe fewer people are going to die, okay, but what are the costs of doing that? Of not having open schools, not having open restaurants, and not having your economy up and running? There are dramatic long-term costs of doing that are way worse than what COVID was doing at the time in terms of the number of people that were dying over and above what normally would die. And no one really took that into account. I mean, that should be the job of a public health official, is to calculate the costs and benefits of what anything that you're going to do. And in terms of inflation, the harm to businesses, then the government has to print trillions of dollars and give it out to everybody. COVID, the COVID relief fund. I got some money. Everybody I know got money. Everybody applied for it. It was like, yay, free money, yay. And I did have to shut down. I did, but I wanted to pay my employees and so on. But there's a cost to doing that. And we now know from now here in 2025 that our American school children are about a year to a year and a half, in some cases even 2 years behind where they would have been, behind the children of the same age in other countries that did not close their schools down. Sweden being the classic example of this. We have the data on this now. They stayed open, and that was okay. And so, but again, the doomsayers say, but what if 100 million people die? Yeah, but you don't know 100 million people are going to die. What if it turns out to be like Ebola, and 1 billion people die? You're going to have blood on your hands. Yeah, but what if that doesn't happen? I mean, for that matter, you might say, what if an asteroid hits the Earth and we go extinct like the dinosaurs? Yeah, okay, yeah, but we can't shut everything down for a remote risk like that.
And the vaccine?
Oh, well, the vaccines work. I'm not a conspiracy theorist about vaccines. There was some misunderstanding and misinformation about that. However, that vaccines would prevent the spread of COVID. That's not the case. The point of a vaccine is to trick your body into being better prepared to deal with the virus as it courses through your organs and tissues. And that it does work that way. Not on everybody. It's not perfect. And there are, apparently some side effects like myocarditis. But for the most part, like any vaccine, it was a good thing, I think. Did it spread, stop the spread? No, it doesn't stop the spread. You could still get it and so on. But, like any vaccine, it's a good technology to use, within certain restrictions and limitations and regulations like anything else.
And seems like a lot of people are against Bill Gates and the WHO. I saw one of your tweets 2 days ago about people generally being against the idea of a billionaire. Do you think that billionaires take more than they actually give / provide to society?
Well, of course, that was one of the arguments about the vaccines. That pharmaceutical companies are making money on them. Well, but we live in America. This is a capitalist system. The drug companies are not owned by the government, so they have to make money. So right off the bat, just to say it's not right for them to make money, okay, then how are they going to pay their employees and keep the lights on? Right. So that's a flawed argument. But there's something deeper that you're hinting at there, that somebody would make money on something that's a public good feels wrong. It's like when Jonas Salk invented the polio vaccine and saved millions of people from paralysis. And they asked him, are you going to make a lot of money on this? And he said, well, it would be like patenting the sun. It's just not right to do that. Okay. But in a system in which pharmaceutical companies are for-profit companies, and it costs hundreds of millions of dollars for them to bring new drugs into the marketplace because of all the regulations, then they have to make money on it. And most of the drugs they make, they don't make money on. So the big ones like Viagra, maybe not anymore, but or the new vaccines or whatever, they have to be able to make a lot of money on those because they're losing money on most other drugs, or they've lost a lot of money in development and research. So, and then more generally, yeah, I've been ranting about this because it's what I call dunce cap economics. There shouldn't be billionaires like the mayoral candidate for the Democratic Party in New York City, announced yesterday. There shouldn't be any more billionaires. I mean, really? I mean, have you ever taken like a basic course in economics that there are
Or starting a
billionaires
business.
or anything? Yeah, just pay attention. That there are billionaires doesn't mean that they took their money from some poor people, or they made middle-class people poor by taking their money or whatever. There's several effects here. What's seen and what's unseen. What's seen are the billionaires, the Jeff Bezos wedding in Venice with all his yacht and then the mini yacht and all the celebrities and, the tens of millions of dollars they spent, complete waste of money. As far as a lot of people are concerned, it's his money. But what they're forgetting is all the other startups, like in the 90s when did he start Amazon? Late 80s, early 90s, and he ran at a loss for 20 years before they started making money. I always followed Amazon because I'm a book author and my books are always on Amazon. I thought, that's cool. I like that. But he always undercut. Nice. They always undercut the bookstores. I mean, they sold them for 40% off. In many cases, they sold them cheaper than I could buy the books from my own publisher. And it's like, how is this guy doing this? Well, he was running a deficit and he could have just gone bankrupt, but he didn't. Okay. But most startups, they don't make it or they survive barely. Right. So the back of the envelope calculation goes like this. I've had venture capitalists explain this to me. For every 100 pitches they hear, they fund one to the tune of many millions of dollars so they can really get a good startup going. And most of that goes to payroll and rent and so on. And then out of the 100 that they fund to the tune of, let's say, $5 to $10 million for a startup, only 10 out of 100, 10% are likely to make it to an IPO or an acquisition by a major corporation, where the venture capitalists and the founders make a lot of money. They make their billions. But the venture capitalists depend on that because the other 90%, they're losing money, or they just barely scrape by. The companies are barely in business, and the venture capitalists, they don't get their money back, or they don't get their money back, for many, many years and so on. So the system is designed to allow these just extraordinary, extravagant billionaires, because most people are going to fail, and we want people to try because we want our smartphones and electric cars and the internet and search engines. And I mean, whatever, take your pick. All the benefits we have are there because of the entrepreneurs and capitalists, not the government. And so, I call this the biography bias. After Steve Jobs died and Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve came out, and millions of people read it, scouring through there. What's the secret sauce? Oh, well, you go to a liberal arts college in Oregon and you drop out and you move back to your parents' house and you set up a startup in the garage with your buddy. And then you get some investors. And before you know it, you're Apple Computers. Oh, really? And how many guys in the 1970s dropped out of college and moved back to their parents' house and did nothing, or started to start up with their buddy and they never made it? They went out of business. And the answer is nobody knows because nobody writes biographies of those guys. But the answer is probably 99 out of 100 never make it.
Yeah, the survivorship bias, but I believe we can control, I don't know, like probably 50% of what happens to your company and in business. Steve Jobs, for example, you asked that question, I would definitely answer you. You grew up without a father. That would be like the number one ingredient,
Oh,
a
yes.
chip on your shoulder.
Right.
Then, yeah, the liberal part, doing a bit of LSD here and there, being a visionary and so forth. Growing up in the hipster era. But what is your take on luck? Do you believe in luck? Is it a factor that is gonna defog itself with time as science advance?
Yeah, interesting question. I've been writing about that a lot lately. Luck, chance, contingency. These are different words to describe things that happen that are unplanned. And so just take luck, for example. There's no such thing as cosmic luck. There's nobody up there calling the shots and making things happen for you. But if you self-identify as a lucky person, uh, more fortunate things are likely to happen because there's research on this now. People who self-identify as lucky tend to score higher on openness to experience. And this is the big five personality dimension: ocean, OCEAN, openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Okay. So self reported lucky people score higher on openness to experience. They're willing to try more things, travel, meet people. They like to read new books. They like new experiences. And they're also higher in agreeableness. They're just friendlier. They're more engaging with other people. They're gregarious and so on. So the person who is high in openness to experience and agreeableness and goes to the party, just some random party, and he just engages with dozens of people, meets a lot of people, and all of a sudden he's got a bunch of names and phone numbers, and this leads to a job, a career, a marriage, whatever. And he thinks, wow, was I ever lucky I went to that party? Yeah, sort of. I mean, the person that didn't go to the party, well, it's not that they were unlucky. They just didn't make it happen themselves. So there's an interaction effect there between the randomness of life and how you engage with the randomness of life. But the larger effect here is called contingency. That is, the analogy is the garden of forking paths. That is to say, you go left instead of right. You go to this party instead of that party. You take this course instead of that course. You marry this person instead of that person. And so every bifurcation point on the path that you go one way or another means you didn't do the other thing, but then this opens up new opportunities and new opportunities. Almost all of that is non-directed. It's random. There's little to make of it, from a cosmic perspective. And then there's the timing of when you happen to do all this stuff. And the analogy here is Bill Gates. Had he been born 10 years earlier or 10 years later, he would not be Bill Gates that we know him, right? Now, he's a smart, hardworking guy. He'd probably be successful in any generation, in any century. But the world's richest person, he was at the right time, at the right place for a software technology that was needed. And he happened to be really good at that, right? And same thing with the Google boys. They happened along. There was already search engines, but they happened along at the right time, at the right place with the right idea. So timing is everything. Now, it's not that nobody would have gotten a software program like Microsoft or a search engine like the Google engine, the ranking system, but it was them at that particular time. So that there's a lot of luck there. You don't pick your parents, for example. There's no choice in where you happen to have been born, what decade or what century you were born in. All of that is out of your control. So my response to that is not that therefore nobody deserves anything. Sure they do, because you still have to make a choice to do something about your good fortune. But we should be grateful, I think. If
That's the point.
Just gratitude.
Like, I'm grateful. I don't believe in luck that much. I'm very rational, very scientific, and I'm not religious either, but I'm very grateful to be here. Which leads me to my next topic, right? Because I think being rational and planning, it's trainable, it's predictable, and you can get better at it with time, just like a game. While if you pray God harder, it's just so random, it won't really happen. And I do very bad with anything religion related and cultish. Like I'm sort of a rebel, and I will never outsource my life to religion, right? And I do think that these people that do believe in luck are also more likely to be religious. You've been religious yourself, and by the way, I think religion, just for disclosure, I think it can be good for people in lower classes and people that don't have science and that don't have the same privilege that I had. But at some point, I do believe it needs to be let go for science. You had a first-hand experience with that. What are your thoughts on religion? Is it scaling as well as it did nowadays with technology, with science? But we've also had random events like COVID in which your life is in danger, and then the only thing you can do is like pray to God, right? Because you don't have much control. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, interesting. So there's different theories about the purpose of religion or who's religious and who's not. There's no data that I know of the relationship between religiosity and self-reported luck, although that would be an interesting question. Maybe I'll do that research for you. But
Thanks.
in general, the idea is that there's at least two major components here. There's belief in a higher power of some kind that makes things happen or that directs the course of events or life or the universe or your life or whatever. But then there's the social aspect of religiosity, which is really a kind of a separate thing that, we're a social primate species. We need to be in groups of people of some kind. And religion has often been one of the major components of doing that. We're going to meet every week on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, whatever your holy day is. And we're going to go to this temple or mosque or, whatever synagogue. And we're going to practice these particular rituals and sing these songs and say these prayers. The idea here is that it doesn't really matter what day it is, what the rituals are, what the words spoken are. None of that matters. It's the doing of it that has an effect on people's lives. What is the effect? Well, it's a kind of a networking effect. That is,
Dopamine, serotonin,
there's all of that, plus just social networking, just meeting people, and
oxytocin.
particularly like-minded people. So there's some research showing that like people don't pick their political parties based on some particular plank in the platform, gun control or immigration or abortion or whatever. They pick the party that feels right for them. These are my people. I like talking to these people. I like their overall worldview, the way things should be in society. And then after the fact, if I say, well, why are you a Republican or why are you a Democrat? People will give me specific answers, not me, but researchers. But those are after the fact reasoning. Here are the reasons I've come up with to explain why I already made this decision. And religion is very much like that. I mean, obviously, it's very much determined by your parents and your family, your upbringing, where you happen to have been born, and so on. If you and I were born in India, we'd likely be, Hindu or Buddhist or whatever, but and less likely to be, say, Christian. But in the West, you're more likely to be a Christian or a Jew, but mostly Christian. And so there's a certain amount of randomness there. But I'm an atheist. Okay, so I don't really get any value out of going to Sunday services or whatever. I never liked it when I was a believer. And as an atheist, as a public intellectual, I've often been invited to attend these secular services on the weekends, where they sing hymns to Isaac Newton and people give testimonies about how they lost their religion. Oh, it's quite amusing. They like
Oh
cancer.
man.
Oh yeah, but I didn't really like that either because I don't personally need that by my temperament. Some people like that. Now we got to be careful not to say the little people need religion because they're dumb or they're weak. I don't think that's the case. I think it's more of what people get out of it. Now, do Christians really believe that Jesus rose from the dead? There was some carpenter in Nazareth who died, was put to the death, and 3 days later, I mean, he was dead for 3 days, and then he was brought back to life. Do they really believe it? They say they do. But do they believe it in the same way if I said, well, my church has a parking lot behind it, and you could go check, oh, yeah, there's the parking lot. I said, that's an empirical claim. I don't think the Jesus resurrection story or most religious myths are in the same category as you can just go out and look yourself to see if it's true. How are you going to check? Is God three in one? Right? The problem in Catholicism. How can God be the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and how could the Son Jesus be God? How is this possible? This doesn't make any sense. But I think most people, they don't really think about it. Like, nah, I don't know, whatever. It's just what we believe, and I think a lot of religion is like that.
And talking about that's an interesting segue, but yeah, Trump attacked Iran not so long ago, and I dislike Trump, everything that he stands for, but I dislike religion even more. And the Ayatollah or whatever he calls himself seems to me like he's a religious fanatic, a zealot or of some kind. So I was like, yeah, good move, Trump. The guy's playing with nuclear weapon. He's mad. He's madder than Trump, which is really hard to beat, by the way. It's a world record. What are your thoughts on what happened in Iran and what is happening today, actually?
Well, of course, it's not an isolated thing. I mean, it's entwined with Israel, and we are long supporters of Israel for very good reason. It's the only Jewish state ever. And
But
so
also, they make sense. Israel makes scientific sense. They make capitalistic sense. They're aligned with reality and scalability, while Iran is a shit show.
Yeah, agreed. All of the above and more. Uh, Iran does not have a nuclear program so that they can develop nuclear power and replace fossil fuels. That is not their goal. It's clear. If it was their goal, they wouldn't need to do their build their centrifuges 300 feet underground under concrete bunkers, right? They just do it like we do here. They're just out in the open. There's fences around them so the terrorists don't go there, but but they're right there, right? And they don't want nuclear weapons just as a deterrence. Like Kim Jong Un probably has nukes because he doesn't intend to use them. Hopefully, so far so good. But it's more of a deterrence, because the United States and Western countries don't invade countries that have nukes. Okay, so maybe that's his logic or reasoning. But the Ayatollah and the Iranians in general, they've made it quite clear who the great Satan is. That's us, United States. Who's the little Satan? That's Israel. And of course, they can't eradicate America, but they can eradicate Israel. They could. It's not
Yeah.
that big a country, and they've said this is what we want to do. I think we should take them at their word and then deal with them accordingly.
And yeah, to what extent should we take someone with the words that they say, yes, their actions, right? Because Trump is another of these guys. You probably remember to meet them with fire or something, fire and terror, whatever words he was using. To what extent should we take someone seriously, especially in the political realm, with their words vs their actions?
Well, okay, so like Trump, a lot of Trump's rhetoric is just I don't know. He's just shooting
Media.
off his mouth, or he's a debate strategy or the art of the deal. I don't think he's playing 4D chess like some people think. I
Fuck
just
no.
think he has
Playing checkers.
a way with his own strategy, like tariffs. I mean, every economist ever has said, tariffs are a terrible idea, and it's not good for the economy. It's bad for prices. It's bad for prosperity, and so on. And so what's he doing? I thought he was a big free market
They
capitalist.
rhyme with Trump and Tower. That's why he did it.
But because of what? I didn't hear you.
They rhyme with Trump and
Oh, I
Tower.
see.
So
That's right.
that's why he did it.
Yeah. Okay. But in fact, I think probably that was never you're never going to impose massive tariffs. Just get people to the debating table. Something, just come to the table and let's negotiate. So, I think when he says to Kim Jong Un, I have a bigger button than you, and we're gonna, blow you to smithereens, if you do anything. Well, yeah, it's just talk, but maybe it's a way of signaling to other people, don't fuck around with us, or else. And it is in a way its own kind of crude form of mutual assured destruction, MAD, which has worked, is a game theoretic model that if you try to do anything to us that causes existential threat, we are going to nuke you. And everybody knows it. And you have to make it quite public. I mean, the whole point of a doomsday weapon is lost if you keep it a secret, which was a great line from Dr. Strangelove. The problem with the Iranians is they can't be deterred because they're looking forward to the afterlife. Telling the Iranians, we're going to kill you all, they would be good. Okay, great. Can't wait. Because I got this great life waiting for me on the other side with the 72 virgins and all that. So deterrence isn't going to work. So we have to practice prevention. And that's just the way it is. That's the world we live in. A lot of libertarians are very isolationist. I know a lot of them. I understand their arguments. It seems like a waste of money. We could be spending money on kids' computers or something, or healthcare. Why are we spending money in Ukraine and Iran and supporting Israel and so on? We don't live in a world free of political violence and threats, such that we could pull back and just take care of our own people. That's not the world we live in. And I'm sorry, but that's the way it goes.
And when it comes to these leaders, whether it's the Ayatollah, Trump, or Putin, is testosterone dictating most of their decisions?
Yes, maleness is the number one predictor of violence. There's some truth to that, actually. Well, what about Margaret Thatcher? Well, yeah, she's a woman, but she's also deeply.
She had testosterone, for sure. A lot of it.
Probably individually, but also she's in a world in which that is how you're supposed to act. So yeah, there's probably some of that, but again, it's the system is designed for that. So even if you plop a woman in there with much lower testosterone, that doesn't necessarily change the equation, because the equation requires at least signaling that you can't be trifled with, and that you will defend your country and so on. That's the world we live in.
And talking about testosterone and estrogen, you did an edition on trans and LGBT rights and all of that. Do you think it's still the right way to view the world? Seems to be a very simplistic way to view the world, testosterone and estrogen, because there's so many other molecules, but I still think it's the right framework. Near Eyal, which I had on my pod, would sort of disagree with that, but I view the world in bio. Yeah, Near was disagreeing with my theory of biochemical everything. That's how I view the world. It's biochemicals. It's what you have in your blood.
Who did you have on your show?
Near Eyal. He's a pretty famous author. Yeah. He's about to drop a book. He's a very smart thinker, just like you are. And yeah, what are your thoughts on that and the full debate that's happening right now? We're sort of past the woke mob right now, and sort of coming back to science and rationality, but also these two things to someone of that woke mob, like talking about science and rationality, it would sound to them like mansplaining or whatever they call it, right? It's like a very masculine stigma. So yeah, what's your take on all that?
Well, first of all, I'd recommend you have on your show Carol Hooven, who wrote the book T standing for testosterone, and the massive role this plays in a lot of different areas of life. And she's right. I mean, pretty much every biologist already knows all this stuff, but that she got in trouble at Harvard for even saying it, tells us the times we live in. Now, maybe that's changing. This was about 5 years ago for Carol that she lost her job at Harvard. But, just the fact that there are massive differences between men and women on average, that everybody knows this, and everybody has always known this since the beginning of time until, last week when, the culture wars erupted. Okay, not last week, maybe 5 to 10 years ago when all this stuff started happening. The expansion of, LGBTQ, et cetera, to include trans as not just kind of a subjective gender feeling, but an actual claim that I want to change sex and I'm going to change sex. Okay. The reason this doesn't work is because you can't. Men cannot become women. Women cannot become men. End of story. Well, what about the edge cases? Okay, well, there are edge cases for fingers. This is the analogy that people use. Some tiny percentage of the population is born with 6 fingers, but that doesn't mean digits are on a spectrum. right? There's just anomalies. So there are some of these chromosomal, hormonal um, anomalies and variations. And of course, there's a bell curve for everything, including testosterone. Some men are low in T, some women are high in T. There's some women who have higher testosterone than some men, just like there are some women who are taller than some men. That doesn't mean anything, because what we're looking at here are the mean differences in the bell curve, such that that's the reason we have women's sports, and that women have fought for since the 1970s, starting with the Title IX protections of women's sports, because as everybody could see, there's a huge difference here. So just take, since we're in the middle of Wimbledon just started, the number one female players is Arina Sabalenka. She is massive. She is strong, huge legs and arms, rips the ball, and it's just phenomenal to watch. Okay. She wouldn't last 15 minutes with the number one or any in the top 10 or even any of the top 100 men players. It would be 6-0, 6-0, 6-0, end of story. She'd be lucky to even get a point. Okay. So if we didn't make this distinction between men and women, there'd be no women's sports at all. There'd be not a single woman on the professional tennis tournament tour. They wouldn't make any money at all. Zero, zip. So, the trans activists who claim that, we should just have these open divisions where, women compete with men, and that trans women who are men can compete in women's sports. And so, they are delusional. They have no idea what they're talking about. And it's really quite unfair to women. It's a violation of women's rights, women's spaces in prisons, bathrooms, and all that. And as a lot of gay people have been pointing out, it's homophobic, because their underlying messages are to gay people: you're not gay, you're straight, you're just in the wrong body. So switch bodies, change sex, and then you'll have heterosexual sex and you'll be normal again. Okay, this erases, decades, half a century of, gay rights for marriage, for job discrimination, the whole thing. And so that's ultimately what's wrong with it.
But as a libertarian, should we just give them the choice? Period. I mean, the categories, the sport categories, that's a big no, right? But like just give them the choice to do whatever they want.
Well, one solution is you could just have open divisions that anybody could enter. So a lot of sports have done this already.
Right.
I was reading
Spartan races.
Yes, right. So, men, women, trans women, older people, whatever, handicap, anybody could just enter that division. So you have the men's division, the women's division, different age categories, and then you have an open division. Now, the problem for trans athletes is there aren't that many. So you enter a division and there's, one other person or something, should they get equal prize money? And, so you have to, so yeah, libertarian solution is let the market decide. Okay. I'm okay with that. Unless you're violating women's rights. I mean, there are legal protections for women that have been fought for a century, since, they got the vote in the United States in 1920. And so, the rights have come, hard, particularly in the 70s. They came rapidly, but after a long fight. And so to then tell women, okay, we're going to let men come into the bathroom. Now, any good liberal would say, well, no, that's not right. Of course. But then the trans activist says, yeah, but they're not women. They're not men. They're women. It's like, but they're not women. So it comes down to a factual, just a statement, just an empirical question. Can a man become a woman? And the answer is no, they can't. Everybody knows they can't. You can play with words. What's gender, not sex? And they feel it inside. Okay, they may be. And again, libertarian position, people can identify with whatever they want. I don't care, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody else, which is always, the position of libertarians. The freedom for me to swing my hand ends at your nose. We can't, you can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt other people. The trans movement is hurting women across the board, in sports, and, bathrooms, locker rooms, prisons. There's a non-trivial number of men in prison identifying as women so they could get put in a women's prison. A, it's safer for them, and B, it gives them access to, potential rape victims. It's not good. And it's time we stood up for this. And I've been astonished that liberals, of all people, can't see this, at least some of them. They feel like, well, this is the next rights revolution. I should get behind it. No, I'm sorry. You're wrong on this one.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to have you for a round two, Michael, because I feel we just scratched the surface today. Till then, where can people find out more about you?
Skeptic.com is my magazine, and michaelshermer.com has all my books, my old Scientific American columns. All 214 of them are posted there, and so on.
So that was Michael and Charles for another Charles